We've listened to the presentation from Slovenia, which is one interesting perspective. And I'd like to talk to you about the challenges and opportunities of the future of mountain tourism. Maybe we start with Neil Rogers, because you have very much the international perspective. The other participants have a destination background, and you are in between, I guess. But maybe I ask you, what is, in your opinion, you have the scan of the whole world, what is the biggest challenge, besides the sustainability issue at large, the biggest challenge for mountain tourism in the future that we have to tackle?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to split sustainability out of the challenge, because many of the things that most of the mountain areas, destinations are experiencing is shared. I mean, just wrote down a few of these. Obviously, climate change and our carbon emissions. I won't ask for a show of hands, but it'd be interesting to know how many people in the audience actually offset their carbon emissions from their trip down here today. You know, these are kind of questions that you know, we're all in the industry, we all know the problem, but do we actually do anything about it? This isn't something that's new, this is something that's been going on for years. To give you an example of something that is innovative, I'm based in Stockholm, and I flew on SAS down here, and in their in-flight magazine I read for the first time that they voluntarily offset all the carbon emissions of all of their travelers for flights who are registered with their frequent flyer program. So individual companies are doing good motions, because they know that individual travelers don't do it themselves. Water security. Had a chat with some friends in Iceland last week who said to me, you know, we've just made a video about the state of the glaciers in Iceland, and it's amazing, but we're actually seeing this huge growth in visitation to the glaciers right now. And I said, you know, why is that? And he said, because people are beginning to realize that those glaciers won't be here for very long, and they want to take the opportunity now to see glaciers before they go away. So again, and then the number one, if I was to ask groups of people within the adventure travel trade, for example, about what they would consider would be habitat loss. This comes up time again, habitat and biodiversity loss. Obviously very delicate ecosystems within the mountains. Over-tourism, everybody's been talking about it, but actually under-tourism, I think, is the one we need to be focusing on with, you know, with mountain tourism. There are so many small little destinations within the mountains who are out there wondering where their next visitor is going to come from, even during the peak season, never mind, you know, the 9 months of the year. So under-tourism is thing. You know, rural exodus. I mean, there are whole communities throughout the world, but certainly within Europe, we're seeing people, young people, leaving rural areas. And I should say that most of the things that I'm talking about now actually could have positives. Rewilding Europe, 8 projects going on right now, 6 of them in mountain regions. So there are opportunities there where, you know, people leave the rural landscape, but actually there's something that can actually go on to help that situation. And I think, you know, the challenges for us as an industry is that, you know, the impacts have to be scalable. We have to group together. We've got to work together to take on these challenges, and we can't expect that people will do things voluntarily. You know, sustainable destination management is absolutely critical. It should be adhered to global principles, and it's not something that, you know, in a way should be voluntary. It's something I think that in the future is going to have to be compulsory.
Maybe that's a good bridge to Martin Francoux, sustainable destination management. You say of yourself that you're in the back end of destinations, trying to help them manage, especially in mountain destinations with snow tourism. So what could a sustainable destination management look like, and how can your organization help, or how can the destinations help each other?
Sure, I think there is 2 things you were mentioning about working together. This is actually what brings us in France to create Cluster Montagne. That is an association, public-private association, gathering all the different stakeholders of the French mountain industry. This is not only the backstage of it, with all the companies, private sectors, from consulting to manufacturer, but also the ski area operators, the different institutions and research institute. And you were asking about the key challenges. For sure, we have been talking in the last hours about the sustainability. We used to say on our side that we are solution providers, and if I may take maybe 2, 3 concrete examples of sustainability on different scales. For instance, you know, in France there are some, we have been creating natural regional park that we say that is quite unique, that is actually all the stakeholders of the territory saying now we will create our legal framework that is differently from the national natural conservation park, and every farmers, industries, elected people and so on are decided to work together to value the natural resources by developing the tourism. If I'm taking the example of ski areas in France, they are been working very much about the consumption of the energy, and recently, for instance, I'm taking just one example of Compagnie des Alpes Serre Chevalier ski resort that decided in the last 10 years to work on saving energy and producing the energy. We are looking at a climate change slide with a snowmaking system, for instance, and they decided in the next years to use the pipes of the snowmaking system in order to produce hydroelectricity. Same thing for the solar panel. You know that obviously with the snow, the solar is a big energy in the mountain that we should use. So we have been transforming in the last 2 years all the stations of the lift, working with the manufacturer and also with startups. And this is clearly what you were saying about working together. The ski area operators, startups that are working on different new energy system, and the manufacturer, and consulting all together to work on this. And lastly, we were talking this morning about how to monitor, how to set up all the indicators, and some companies have created what we call environmental observatory in order to create big data management of all the different data, I mean biodiversity data. And each time they have a new project, somehow they have this long-term perspective and tools. That is the environmental observatory that have been developed, for instance, in Chamonix Valley, in 3 valleys. And every time they have a new project, somehow they need to figure out how to put it on a longer-term perspectives. So I think it's quite interesting expertise. Yeah.
Thank you. So you're a representative of, say, a mature destination with a long history, France, a long history of alpine and mountain tourism. Maybe we look to Kyrgyzstan, which maybe is a market in a different situation. At least on the international level, you try to attract successfully more and more international visitors. Are you grappling with similar problems or similar challenges, or are you fighting at completely different fronts at the moment because you're in a different stage of development?
Yeah, of course. I think it's working. Okay. All right. First of all, I would like to speak about from the perspective of the country where I come from. First of all, the territory of Kyrgyzstan, 95% of the territory is consistent of the mountains, and you can imagine how much the mountains, related to the daily life of the people living in the country. And I come from the place. Actually, I grew up even in the mountains, and I can say that it's the part of our culture, the part of our daily life. And I definitely agree with the previous speakers that one of the core challenges for the country is the climate change. And the place where I come from, for example, in my childhood, we used to have a lot of snow, and now it's a bit less snowing, for example, in the winter time, which is affecting definitely the winter tourism related to the mountains and the slopes, for example. In Kyrgyzstan, we have 25 ski resorts, and out of them, only 17 are functioning, and maybe most of the time related to the climate change as well, and of course, 60 to 70% of population in Kyrgyzstan live in the rural areas. And rural areas, what I say, I mean the mountain, mountainsides, countrysides. So, and it's also related to the poverty reduction. And I see this one of the opportunities for the mountain tourism development, how actually it can influence the life the life quality of people living in the mountains. And for example, creating the new products, let's say agritourism, could be one of the options to give the opportunity for people to make more income for their families. Because sometimes, you know, when people don't have enough resources in the family, they try to use the natural resources more. It's just like a theory of Maslow, the Maslow pyramid. So in the first step, just in the below, in the bottom, you have to have good food, and then, like, let's say the roof, and they start like cutting the forest, or, you know, damaging the nature where they are living for. So, and the tourism could give more income for the families, which could become as sustainably developed in the country. So based on this, we, as a government, just recently, we endorsed the national program for the tourism sector development for the 5 years starting this year. And one of the core pillars where we see the development of overall the national tourism in the country is the sustainable development.
So you were in the good column in Dirk Glaser's presentation about the research.
Definitely.
Okay, very good. So now you say developing things together with the community, with the people,
Yes.
is one way of tackling the challenges that you two have already mentioned. And that's something that reminds me of what we've been talking about just outside. You said the biggest challenge is communication with the community, with the locals, to do something together to make it infrastructure viable, sustainable. Is that the same in Lyngenfjord? So is there a similar kind of challenge to address?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. We actually, I can just explain, Lyngenfjord is far up in the north. It's half the way to the North Pole. It's like 2,000 kilometers from here, and then 2,000 more you're at the North Pole. And that's a huge destination. It's 130 kilometers to drive through. Takes me 3 to 4 hours. But we are just 15,000 people living there, inhabitants. We have around 140,000 guest nights. So we are quite a small destination, and we are a sustainable travel destination. We are awarded from Innovation Norway, and but to implement these criteria and work sustainable in the daily life, or how to develop tourism in our region, it's a challenge to include the municipalities, the majors, the politicians, and the local people in this work. Yeah, just an example. We could see as one of these action plans we have to develop the region more sustainable, to develop mountain biking.
Mm-hmm.
There is already a market for that in our region, and but we want to have the right people visiting to us, coming to us. They should come stay for 1 week, not only for a few days. They should not come with boats. They should stay land-based in our region, and they should use guides from our region. So, and there's a lot of things we as a destination company can do, but we cannot do everything. We have to, politicians, the municipality have to work together with us to develop trails, as an example. Mm-hmm. And that's a challenge, yeah.
Because you have to deal with the politics and you have different interests?
Yes, because for them it's about money. Okay, we have trails, but it costs to maintain them. It costs to build, and we, of course, in Norway, oil industry and fishing industry is a big thing, and there you really make big money. And so far in tourism, not. So it's not so easy to make municipalities pay for infrastructure for tourism.
And now I have a question for you, coming from Korea, Kyungmu-young, because when I read that you come from Pyeongchang, I thought, okay, what kind of challenge will Pyeongchang have? Everybody in the whole world knows this place after that Winter Olympics, but I'm sure, I can't imagine now, but I'm sure you will tell me what your challenge is. Probably it's one that actually directly is linked to the mass event.
Yeah, there will be different challenge and opportunity. First, Korea's ski industry. after Pyeongchang Olympic Games, we tried to the approaching to the China market. It is definitely, as you knew, that being market, especially individual tourists who are family members. So they were approaching to the China market so many years ago, but now they knew that which one is winter sports, kind of ski and snowboard, ice hockey and skating. It will be easy to way approaching to the China market. And Korea's ski industry already has Hong Kong and Singapore, Malaysia, so we had networking. We had customers, something kind of a special winter season. They visit Korea and learn about ski. And then they really gonna try to the other country, learn about the ski and enjoy the ski. But they doesn't knew that next step, which country is better next in Korea. So both of the things that we opportunity and challenging point, and China is opportunity. So China's ski resort doesn't have ski school. China's ski resort doesn't have something kind of the software, hardware, something like winter sports culture and winter sports behavior. And then the other opportunity is combining Korea and Europe, because Hong Kong and Singapore, Malaysia, they customer already know about the ski. They knew how to riding, how to enjoy the ski area. So we combine that kind of international winter sports process, a kind of program or course. We are just 2 years, 1 year or 2 years done teaching to them, and then we're introducing combined Europe. Some rare is for special place for family group. And last thing that Korea ski industry, we need to do new program, kind of the cross country and snowshoeing, some kind of the activity or winter season. So Korea ski industry nowadays little bit going down that because young generation going out and using by the low cost flight, and then 40 and 50 people who are heavy user of the Korea ski industry, they doesn't more interesting in a Korea ski resort. So far there's three of the opportunity. One thing that we approaching to the China market, and then second thing that Korea ski industry has Asia people, we have network and move to the Europe ski area. Last thing that Korea ski industry need to do kind of the program and process something like from Europe. So three things that opportunity.
Yes, please.
Yes, for us is that we don't see so many, of course there are a lot of challenges, but most opportunities in kind of developing sustainable our destination, and in the future anyway, because we don't have a big hotels, no resorts. The biggest hotel have 110 beds. Most are like cabins,
How
cottages.
many beds does your hotel have?
Actually, as you knew that any more big hotel, any more big area, now they totally changing to the individual tourist. So don't need to the big hotel, don't need to the big area, just small kind of the already ever mentioned that traditional accommodation, traditional people welcoming who from Asia. So we don't need to the big area, a small area. For example, that here the ski resort, a little bit kind of surprising that name is ski lift. Just one lift at a mountain, and then just teaching to kids, but never ever imagination the Asian people. But that moment that a ski instructor, they're energetic, and then the fashion teaching to kids, teaching to them. So Asian people, they want to, especially parents want to that process, that program. So I think that doesn't need to the big area, doesn't need to the big hotel.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No problem.
Yeah.
No, but that's what we are for, because we have the small places,
That's correct,
cottages, lodges, where you come as an individual traveler, and we have a lot of activities, and I think that's the future for mountain tourism. And
Okay, but then if this is one of the trends, individuality, to distinguish the experience from that experience that others have, they have something special to tell, that must be a big opportunity, a big chance, especially for places like yours, where not so many people are yet. You can cater for them. And how do you go abroad by getting the infrastructure in place? How do you plan this? Is there any way that master plan? You said you have a plan in place.
Yes, as I already mentioned, that we've just endorsed the program, the national program, and in the program we have action plan where we are dividing all the actually the directions where we have to work on and what we have to focus on. And the first of all is the infrastructure. The infrastructure is one of the challenges for the development of the mountain tourism, including, and of course we have to do the campings on the way of to destinations or to, I don't know, the historical places where the tourists are interested in most. And first of all, I think the private-public partnership could be as a model to develop the infrastructure and for the attraction of the investments into the big projects or the very small on the level of the villages or the small countryside places. So I think it's kind of like the opportunity as well for the attracting of the individual tourists as well. Because now in a group, we have to also highlight that tourists are more eager to travel individually rather than going in the groups and using the service of tour operators, because it's the kind of like century of internetization. So internet is broadly used in mobile applications. So everyone now has the devices in their pockets, so they can use any type of the mobile apps and know about any type of the services they are provided in the world. So I think it's the opportunity.
I noticed also something interesting, how to share experience and lessons learned. You were mentioning that on the French market we have a long history of developing the Alps and so on. What we realize, because part of our DNA at the Cluster Mountain is also to accompany different countries that are willing to develop mountain resort and so on. I see in the audience they have our Georgian friends. We are currently working, for instance, in Uzbekistan to how to develop and so on.
You already exchange information and share.
Sure. We were even mentioning that some of our members are working very much in Norway to develop bike parks and so on. Something that we realize also is to avoid any copy-paste. And that is one of the risks and the challenges that we found out also in China, in Asian countries, that they need somehow to find their specificities, and for sure the resort close to Karakol or Bishkek will be completely different from Bavarian. And I think this is something we should work on, and we are very keen on sharing the experience on this and make sure we diversify the activities. We are talking about ski habits in Asia, which is totally different. And also what we realize, some of our members, and I'm thinking about ski area operators that are well known in the market, are also providing some expertise to emerging markets and coming back to France and start to realize, how you can accommodate or diversifying the activities, because in China, maybe you ski 1-2 hours, whereas all our resorts in Europe have been developed for 6-7 hours skiing. So I think it's quite interesting by sharing the challenges and the solutions.
So is there something you can learn from how they deal with their needs that they cater for?
Yeah, for sure.
Totally different environment compared in Europe and Asia. For example, that Asia's ski resort just ski area beside accommodation, over 1,000 accommodation they decide to the ski area. But Europe a little bit different, that just hometown make that, and then ski slope a little bit far from that hometown there. So I think that it is challenging each other learn about their different environment, mountain tourism, and there will be understanding that each other product and the exchange to the customer and networking extension to the China and Hong Kong, the other Asian market. It will be better than before. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I think yes. Yeah.
I should also say that our venture tourism is actually a very good fit for many mountain destinations, obviously, because adventure tourism often needs less infrastructure and is less damaging in general to the environment.
It's often better with less infrastructure.
People stay longer, spend more, I think a recent survey from the Adventure Trade Association said it only takes 4 adventure tourists to generate the same income as 100 cruise ship tourists. So the payoff's high. To give you an example of that, I work in Fjord, Norway. In fact, we've had a little bit of interaction, George and I, on biking development tourism. And we focused on road cycling and leisure biking rather than mountain biking. We do mountain biking, but the challenges are so much greater for us. It costs as much more money to develop the trails, to maintain them, especially for single track rather than resort based, whereas we have the roads, we have the hotels, we have the local communities that they pass through, and that's what we tend to concentrate on. We also find that by doing that there are more leisure and road cycling tour operators out there who bring affluent clients to the region. There are less mountain bikers from abroad who travel on international trips and less mountain bike tour operators. So we tend to look at a destination and assess its potential and its assets and then decide what's appropriate for that particular community, and also ask that community during this process planning what type of tourism do they feel is acceptable. Mountain bike tourism, again, we've had this long conversation. There's a huge problem with landowner rights, mountain bikers riding roughshod through people's property without permission, especially prevalent in near university towns and places like that. So there are a number of issues. Community obviously always should come first. Ask the community, find out their secret places, the things, their specialist knowledge, and build your destination DNA and a marketing strategy, product development strategy around that.
But in theory, you're all in competition with each other, all the destinations, but also you're also exchanging ideas. So could there be something maybe like an international, it's a big word now, master plan? So you could say, okay, we developed the DNA of the different regions by exchanging information, by exchanging solutions, and in order to also maybe find each other's niche in a way that we're not destroying each other. Is that something that is possible?
I think it's important to have these global guidelines and to work sustainable as UNWTO is doing. But the real work that has to be done in the destination. We know the destination, we know what to do, and where are the possibilities. And that's a good example with road biking or mountain biking, what you can do. And we don't have the possibilities with road biking. So, but we see we have the ski touring in our region that's world known, and all the ski touring people, they do mountain biking in summertime. So it's a very good match. And so I think this local development is very, very important.
You mentioned seasonality, wintertime, summertime. I think that is also from the challenges that we see in mountains is one of the biggest challenges, that you need to have programs, very different programs for different seasons, because the climate is very different in winter and in summer in the mountains. And also this is enhanced by climate change and other developments. Is seasonality something that one could make a plan of, how to deal with? Is that a priority on your minds, seasonality? Yeah.
Well, for example, if I give an example of Kyrgyzstan, for example, the seasonality is also the challenge, because most of the tourists coming to my country are coming in the summertime, for example, and how we actually have to deal with the other seasons where, for example, spring or winter time. And here, the core issue is the communication with the community living in the countryside. And I absolutely agree with the points of, I don't remember your name.
Martin.
When we have to develop, as you say, the master plans or any kind of the programs or the strategy, we definitely have to communicate with the people living in those destinations, even though we know from analysis and investigations what kind of perspectives and potential this destination has. So in this regard, maybe we can deal with the seasonality and even turn it to the opportunity side.
I think we're running out of time.
Right,
Maybe
okay.
just briefly?
Just shortly, I think as to work that you have all year round activities in your destination is a very big part of the job to develop your destination sustainability. Yeah. And so we are doing that, and we have the ski touring in May and April, March, and we have the Northern Light season, and summer season we have partly low season, so we are developing mountain biking and cruise we are looking for. So that's a very, very important part of to develop the destination.
Okay, so I'd like to make in the end what Dirk Lesser started. I would like to do it also, and so start a tradition. And would ask you to, maybe all of you very briefly answer the small question: what would, in your vision, mountain tourism be? What would be the most striking thing in 2050? Any vision? Just one thing. Of course, there's many.
My hope, in any case, is that we will raise our level and meet the challenge. As individuals, as companies, as destinations, as countries, and the climate change that we are experiencing now does offer us a number of opportunities. You know, International Dark Sky Association, Rewilding Europe, rehabilitation of landscapes. There are so many things that we can do. You know, there are challenges, but there are also opportunities. So we have to look at it positively. And there are the mechanisms already in place to allow us to do this. We have to move from action plans to policy to management and monitoring. You know, there's no other way around it. You know, as Dirk said, you know, if we don't monitor, how the hell are we going to manage? You know, we really have to get down to those basic things and start to monitor.
Okay. Use the good things about climate change.
Absolutely.
Good. 2050.
Is it working? Yeah. Very hard to answer. And, I will take what the mountain guide said this morning. We are to be also pragmatic and realistic. I think it has already started now 2050. And for instance, we launch an initiative to work on the what we call smart resort, working on different challenges, that's accessibility, digitalization of the different services and so on. And I think it really depends on the perspectives, but for sure, climate change, and as you said, and how to combine and not to have a conflict between for sure the environment and the development will be one of the key issues. Yeah.
We have a session on digitalization tomorrow where one of these aspects will be talked on.
2050, I wish we protection our environment and give it to our next generation, winter sports to them. And then maybe 2050, where we're going to come together, North Korea and South Korea will be definitely. Yeah.
Yes.
So I just imagination that, thank you. Yeah. And then I just imagination that at the time, my age is 70, maybe 70 age. I tried to took the train from Seoul through the Pyongyang and then through China and Siberia, that's correct. And then Europe, kind of the 2 months, 3 months that enjoy the winter season, whole winter season. At 2050, I wish that, yeah.
Cool. Good wish.
Thank you.
Well, actually, it's a very tough question where we have to be in 2050. But I can imagine that in that period of time, anyway, now the trend in the tourism is going to the mountain. Mountain tourism has very big potential, not only in our country, but all overall in the world. And I would wish to also have really regional cooperation in between of countries where we can solve problems together, like waste management, climate change, a fight, for example. So all of these things should be managed on a proper way, in an effective way, and I think we'll flourish.
So vision of cooperation internationally?
Yeah, I think future of tourism is in the mountains. And I hope for our destination at least, and for others, of course, that we, in a way, can control the development of our destination in a sustainable way. That's the most important thing.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry this is always such a short time only for the panels, but maybe I think the idea is that you in the audience can identify people that maybe have interests similar to your own interests, and speak to them on the coffee break or at lunch or tonight. So look at them again, here they are, and give them a round of applause. Thank you very much.